Right now, Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
Thanks, Paul. Welcome to the... Wait, where am I again? Oh, wait. This is the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call set. I remember now. I remember you guys. How you guys doing? It's been a while. So, what did I miss? Oh, yeah, that's right. Pitchers and catchers reported. Yeah, that's true. Totally forgot about that. Oh, yeah, Penguins played today. Yeah, that's right. They had the game with Calgary. They lost 5-4. A couple goals for Geno Malkin coming off suspension. That's cool. Justin Schultz is back. He had an assist on the Jay Gensel goal. Crosby scored one, too. Yeah, I forgot about that. That happened, too. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of college basketball. Pitt lost to Virginia Tech today. Really close game. They kept it tight. Duquesne won today. They beat GW. Penn State, West Virginia both lost on the road. What am I forgetting? Wait, did something happen with Antonio Brown again? Oh, was that the thing on Twitter? Oh. You guys want to talk about that? Okay, I guess we'll talk about that. Let's get into it. So Antonio Brown taking some questions from other people on Twitter. And the subject of Ben Roethlisberger was broached. Now, I know there's a lot of varying opinions on this, both on Ben Roethlisberger's side. There's a lot on Antonio Brown's side. A lot of people have been defending him. Some people defending both sides of the coin. I talked about this earlier today on Sports Radio 93.7 The Fan. I talked about how there's a couple irrefutable things to discuss about this. I'm still of the belief that the divorce might be worse than the marriage. Yes, things don't look great with this situation right now. I don't think either side benefits if this breaks up, especially Antonio Brown. He's got a lot more to lose if this marriage does indeed end, and I keep using that analogy. Just go with me on this. When you look at the productivity that he's had the last 6 seasons, now bear in mind, what Antonio Brown's done in the last 6 seasons, no other receiver has done in the history of the league. 100-plus catches, 1,000-plus yards in 6 straight seasons. No one else has done it. But in addition to that, Antonio Brown will be throwing away 8 straight years where he was targeted more than 100 times. That's the kind of production that he now walks away from. Is it guaranteed in another city? Depends on the team, I guess, he plays for. But I also think it depends on the quarterback that he plays with. So there's a situation where the grass may not be greener on the other side. Yeah, I understand he and Ben don't get along. At least not this past season they didn't. But is it guaranteed that things will be better at the next team he goes to? What if he goes to, say, in Arizona and he's with Josh Rosen? What if he's in Jacksonville? What if he ends up, I don't know, what if he ends up in Denver and he has to play with Joe Flacco, who just got traded there, but is he really the Joe Flacco from 5 years ago? No. So depending on where he goes, is he really going to benefit from that kind of opportunity? Depending on the quarterback and the team he's playing with? And will the Steelers really send him to a possible contender that they may have to face at some point? For me, all those questions, they don't add up to answers that I think are favorable for him. At the same time, do the Steelers have any other guy that can produce at the level that he's produced? Do they have guys that can beat defenses the way he beats defenses? Do you have guys that can be routinely double-teamed and still find ways to get open to catch the ball, as much as he's done over the last 8 seasons, not counting his rookie year? Do you have anybody else that can do that? I know a lot of people like Juju. I'm one of those people. Love Juju. When he got drafted, I was one of those people that tweeted out, Juju's a baller. He'll be great here. But is he ready to do that yet? I'd say no. So as bad as the marriage looks, the divorce could be a lot worse. So if you want to get into that, we can discuss that too. Let's kind of double back the pens here, because a game against Calgary, when things looked great in the first period, they fell behind, but Jay Gensel deflects a shot from Justin Schultz, who stepped right in and looked like he hadn't missed 50-plus games with a broken leg. He came back in and looked really, really great today. Everything about him looked pretty smooth. I thought it was kind of daring that they paired him with Jack Johnson, but it had a little bit of a benefit to it, so can't really argue with how Schultz played. I thought he did okay. Evgeny Malkin, coming off that suspension, had 2 more goals, both on the power play. I thought the power play looked really good today. Mike Sullivan said after the game, that's the power play you expect them to have every time they get out there. So you saw that, and that was something that benefited them. And the fact that they were able to do that with that kind of regularity and be that efficient, that's something that you feel good about. At the same time, there were some lapses on defense. There were some embarrassing moments for that defense. There was one play where 3 guys scored on 4. Doesn't happen a lot, but it did. So at the same time, I know Mike Sullivan said that they take a lot of positives out of this game because they think the next game might be equally as important, if not more. That's true. But at the same time, you're looking at the standings and going, okay, well, the switch has to come on at some point. The question is when. That's a fair question to ask. Pirates news, Jamison Tyone named as the opening day starter by manager Clint Hurdle. Kind of an early announcement. Usually it doesn't get out till later on in spring training, but they got to it early. They crossed it off the list. Chris Archer will start the home opener. I'm not surprised there. I figured it would be some variation of the two. I figured one would start opening day. I figured the other one would start the home opener. I wasn't really sure which would be which. So that's not surprising to me. And I think both guys, especially Tyone. I think Tyone is a guy that definitely appreciates that honor. I think he'll do well with that honor. I think he'll go into Cincinnati and actually be ready to pitch a good game. I'm interested to see Chris Archer in a much better light and with a clean slate. A healthy Chris Archer. Chris Archer who knows his catcher going in. He has a relationship now with Francisco Cervelli. He's admitted it was hard to trust his catchers when he first got here. And now he's willing to do that a lot more often. I'm willing to see him start at 0 as opposed to coming in midseason. So I'm interested in that. I'm also interested in seeing what Joe Musgrove and Trevor Williams do. Trevor Williams and Jamison Tyone, their numbers looked almost identical, except one aspect. Tyone's a guy who gets a handful more strikeouts than Williams does, but their numbers looked pretty similar. And in the second half of the season, both guys looked a lot better than they did in the first half. You're talking 2 guys that were among the best pitchers in the National League by the time that season was over. Tyone was 5th among all National League pitchers in wins above replacement. That's something that sticks out. So when you have those 2 guys coming back, but also, once again, the Chris Archer starting on a clean slate, it makes a lot of sense. Now, the one thing that sticks out for me and the one question I will ask, with the pitching that they have, the rotation expecting to be good, if not at least solid and consistent, the bullpen being expected to be good, if not solid or consistent, how are they going to score runs? 412-575-2600. Give me a call. We'll talk about it. See you in a few.
The Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call is brought to you by Ireland Contracting, putting new roofs on Pittsburgh homes for over 25 years. Call Ireland Contracting at 1-800-NEW-ROOF.